Seoul scratches its head as Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe suggests South Korea's cozy ties with its neighbour to the north could have been the driving force behind Tokyo's curbs on the export of high-tech material to South Korea. Breaking his silence, perhaps, President Moon Jaein might make his first official comments about Japan's export restrictions when he meets his top aides in the coming hours. Plus, for the first time since the nuclear deal was agreed in 2015, Iran has breached agreed limits on stockpiling enriched uranium. The remaining members of the deal express dismay. Our top story this morning then, more remarks over the weekend from Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Tokyo's aggressive trade restrictions against South Korea. He implies the reason behind the move is more than just economic retaliation against a diplomatic dispute related to wartime forced labor. Our Won Jung-hwan starts us off.
Appearing on local TV on Sunday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said the tightened restrictions on exports of semiconductor manufacturing materials to South Korea is due to what Japan deems to be the occurrence of an inappropriate matter. Japan's Trade Ministry first mentioned the term a week ago when the measures were first announced, but did not clarify what it meant. Many watchers say the restrictions are clearly a reaction to Seoul's stance on a dispute over compensation for wartime forced labor. But it now appears that inappropriate matter may involve North Korea, considering Abe's latest statement. While commenting on South Korea's relationship with North Korea, including on sanctions and trade, Abe said he does not trust Seoul anymore. Abe did not elaborate, but it seems to go along with a statement made by one of his close aides last week, saying the restrictions are due to the unknown final destination of their export products. Goichi Hagiuda stated that chemical products exported to South Korea could have gone to North Korea for military purposes. He explained that during a certain period, there was a massive order for etching gas, and the South Korean company overseeing the order is now unreachable. Watchers say Abe's remarks and those of his close aides suggest Japan imposed the restrictions as it assumes their export products could have gone to North Korea via Seoul. But Abe's critics in Japan accuse him of using Korea to rally right-wing supporters behind him and his nationalist party ahead of the upper house election set for later this month. They say Abe thinks he can garner more votes by taking a hardline stance on Korea. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi and the Presidential Chief of Staff for Policy, Kim Sang-jo, met on Sunday with the top executives of major South Korean companies to address the issue of Japan's new export controls. Although the names of the guests were not disclosed, reports say the luncheon was attended by the leaders of Hyundai Motor Group, SK Group and LG Group. They're among the many firms vulnerable to the trade tensions as Tokyo's regulations limit components for chips and smartphones being exported to South Korea. Meanwhile, Samsung Electronics Vice Chairman Lee Jae-yong has traveled to Japan to find ways to minimize the damage to Samsung's semiconductor business. Despite reporters peppering him with questions, he remained tight-lipped upon his arrival in Tokyo on Sunday evening. And President Moon Jaein will preside over a meeting with his top aides this afternoon, and attention is on whether he will offer some remarks on Japan's trade restrictions on South Korea. Now, the president hasn't led the weekly meeting for over a month now due to his recent tour to Northern Europe and his annual leave last week. He is yet to make his own views known since the Japanese government announced its new set of export restrictions last Monday. But he might choose to stay low-key to prevent Seoul-Tokyo relations worsening any further. However, President Moon is expected to comment on the current economic situation in South Korea. Now, sticking with this huge story for us here in South Korea, since Tokyo's new export restrictions on high-tech materials to Seoul took effect, there have been, naturally, growing concerns about the impact they are going to have on South Korea's biggest tech firms. We're talking about companies here like Samsung, LG, and SK Hynix. Analysts say, unfortunately, it is inevitable that Japan's measures will hurt them in the long run. Our Go Eun-hee has this report.
Some of Korea's IT industry sources say firms aren't immediately feeling the impact of Tokyo's export restrictions on materials needed to make chips and displays. That's mainly because Korean firms have stockpiles of the materials. However, many analysts say the restrictions will hurt Korean firms in the long run, citing Korea's dependence on chip material imports from Japan. The tighter export curbs target three materials. For photoresist or light-sensitive materials that are used in chip manufacturing, more than 90% of Korea's total imports come from Japan. For fluorinated polyamides, used for making displays using Samsung and LG smartphones, the figure was almost 94%. An economic expert explained the reason behind the high share.
The quality of items that Korea imports from Japan is very high. Because Korea's chip and Japan's high-tech material sectors rely on each other, it's difficult for us to find other markets aside from Japan. It will take a long time for other countries, like those in Europe, to catch up to Japanese technology.
Experts say that Japan's move might not only hurt the nation's economy, which relies on chip exports, but it also may possibly affect the global chip industry in the long run, considering that Korean tech giants were among global semiconductor sales leaders in the first quarter of this year. Now, all eyes are on how the two countries' governments are handling the matter. Government officials are considering all necessary countermeasures, including taking the matter to the World Trade Organization, where the dispute settling process is expected to take around 2 to 3 years. Korea's trade minister said earlier that Japan's move goes against the norms of the WTO, whereas Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe argued the opposite, claiming it is a national security issue. A local expert explained the reason behind Seoul's announcement.
The WTO forbids members from imposing export restrictions aside from tariff measures, but there are cases when restrictions are allowed. One is when the country applying the measures is facing a shortage of raw materials. The other is when the country's national security is being threatened. However, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is not explaining the reason when mentioning the national security issue.
Experts emphasize that the two sides must avoid economic tit for tat, as this could cause even more harm to both their economies. Kowloon, Arirang News.
Now, in other news, top U.S. nuclear envoy Stephen Biegun is traveling to Europe to sit down with officials on North Korea's final, fully verified denuclearization. His South Korean counterpart is also in Europe this week, and watchers are seeing this as a chance for Seoul and Washington to coordinate before the North and the U.S. resume their working-level talks. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
Stephen Biegun, Washington's point man on North Korea, will travel to Europe Monday for talks with his South Korean counterpart and European officials on measures to achieve Pyongyang's final, fully verified denuclearization. The U.S. State Department explained that Biegun's 4-day visit to Brussels and Berlin is aimed at advancing Washington's shared efforts to bring about the regime's FFVD. Seoul's Foreign Ministry says Lee Do-hoon, Seoul's Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, will visit Germany this week to hold meetings with Biegun and German officials. There are high hopes for the meetings as they follow the announcement of the resumption of Pyongyang-Washington working-level talks by U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un when they had a hastily arranged encounter at the DMZ late last month. The focus is on whether the talks could lead to another summit between Kim and Trump. The officials are expected to discuss details of Washington's corresponding measures to Pyongyang, including humanitarian aid and the establishment of a liaison office. It's left to be seen whether they will also touch upon the issue of resuming the Inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex and Mount Kumgang Tourism Project. Some analysts also predict Biegun could meet with North Korean officials in Europe. Ahead of the second North Korea-US summit in Hanoi, Biegun held a series of meetings in Sweden with the North's Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee in January. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, following the passing of its self-imposed deadline, Iran says it's fully prepared now to further enrich uranium to any level and with any amount. Iranian officials say they are going to reduce the country's commitments every 2 months unless the other countries still in the deal protect Iran from crushing American sanctions. US President Donald Trump says Iran, quote, better be careful. Lee Seung-jae reports.
In a news conference broadcast live on Sunday, senior Iranian officials confirmed Tehran will move away from the commitments it made under the 2015 nuclear deal every 60 days, unless the other signatories of the pact protect Iran from U.S. sanctions.
In a few hours, the technical work will be done, and enrichment beyond 3.67% will begin. We predict that Monday morning, when agency comes to measure our enrichment, will be higher than 3.67%.
According to Iran's foreign ministry, the move comes as European members of the pact have failed to abide by the deal.
The reason we are starting our second step in reducing our commitments from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action today is that Europe and other members could not meet our demands, especially in the field of oil and bringing back our income. They haven't been able to do anything worthy.
The other signatories have expressed grave concerns over Iran's threats, including Britain's top diplomat, who said the Middle East will be far more dangerous if Iran acquires nuclear weapons.
Well, we continue to think alongside the French and the Germans that the most important priority is for Iran to remain nuclear-free. We think it would be far more dangerous for the Middle East if Iran acquired nuclear weapons. We'd still like to find a way to make this deal work. We're very concerned about the news that has come out today, and we will wait for independent verification by the relevant international body before deciding what next steps. But obviously, if Iran is breaching this deal, there will be very serious consequences.
During a cabinet meeting Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Iran's announcement an extremely dangerous move and urged European leaders to impose strong sanctions on Tehran.
This is very, very dangerous step. I call on my friends, the heads of France, Britain, and Germany. You signed this deal and you said that as soon as they take this step, severe sanctions will be imposed. That was the Security Council resolution. Where are you?
Despite Tehran's continued threats, the government insists it remains open for dialogue and is leaving the door open to diplomacy. French President Emmanuel Macron says he and Iranian President Hassan Rouhani have agreed to seek conditions for a resumption of dialogue by next week. An unnamed U.S. official has confirmed that the U.S. will continue to impose maximum pressure on Iran unless the nation stops developing nuclear weapons. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, there was yet another big protest in Hong Kong on Sunday. This time, though, the vibe was rather different, with protesters peacefully taking their message to a mainland Chinese audience. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Hong Yu. So tell us about this new tactic from the protesters in Hong Kong.
Well, Mark, instead of gathering in Hong Kong City Financial District, as they have been doing most weekends, tens of thousands of people marched through the city's main tourism district to appeal to a mainland Chinese audience. The organizers say 230,000 protesters joined the latest demonstration, heading towards West Kowloon Railway Station, the city's high-speed rail station that connects Hong Kong to mainland China. Protesters chanted and carried slogans such as "Free Hong Kong" in Mandarin, so the Chinese tourists could understand.
We hope that we can let them see the peaceful form of protest typical of Hong Kong. Over there in the mainland, the media is rather censored, so they may only have heard stories of righteous conflicts and cannot see our peaceful form of protesting.
This time the protest came over here to Kowloon. Actually, I joined all the previous protests too. I think that no matter where the protest takes place, there is no difference. Hong Kong people took the initiative to march and give voice to our concerns.
The demonstrators fear an extradition bill would allow Chinese authorities to take people for political reasons and undermine Hong Kong's semi-autonomous legal system. Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam had pushed forward with the legislation, saying it was aimed at closing legal loopholes, but was forced to suspend the bill due to public anger. Now protesters are demanding for the bill's complete withdrawal and Lam's resignation. Deutsche Bank has announced a plan to cut 18,000 jobs by 2022 to boost profitability and shareholder returns. The bank has been struggling to compete as a major force on Wall Street due to regulatory penalties and fines, high costs, weak profits, and a low share price. In an attempt to cut its total annual cost from $25.6 billion to $19 billion, the bank will drop the investment bank's stock trading business and scrap its global equities business. The restructuring follows its failure to agree a merger with rival Commerzbank. On top of the world yet again, the United States has solidified its dominance of women's football with a 2-0 victory in Lyon, France, over the Netherlands in the 2019 Women's World Cup final. After a scoreless first half, the Americans scored twice in the second 45 in front of the sellout crowd at the Stade de Lyon. The victory gives the U.S. women's team their second straight World Cup title and a record 4th overall.
Now back to domestic news. South Korea's National Assembly is holding a confirmation hearing on this Monday for Yoon Seok-yeol, who is President Moon Jae-in's pick for prosecutor-general. Rival parties are expected to clash as they screen Yoon's credentials and qualifications. Key issues will likely include his alleged meddling in a bribery case involving a former tax agency official, as well as a suspected fraud case surrounding his mother-in-law. Yoon's views on prosecutorial reform will also be under the microscope. Although the position requires a confirmation hearing, it doesn't require parliamentary approval. Yoon currently heads up the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office. He has investigated high-profile cases, including the power abuse scandal involving ousted former President Park Geun-hye. Now, countries around the world are racing to develop a supercomputer based on quantum physics. And South Korean researchers are really on the cutting edge of developing innovative ways to turn this transformative tech from theory, as it currently is, to reality. Oh Seong with more.
South Korean researchers are working on the building blocks of supercomputing networks that are hundreds of thousands of times faster and more secure than present-day technology. Quantum computing researchers at Korea Institute of Science and Technology have developed ways to use diamond structures to generate qubits. Normal computers store and send data in binary form as either ones or zeros. However, quantum computers use qubits, which can exist as a 1 and a 0 at the same time, in what's called a state of superposition. As both possibilities exist, this increases the amount of data the computer can store or process, meaning it can run through all possible outcomes at once. However, it's not just the number of qubits that matter. As they're largely volatile, keeping them isolated and in a workable state is one of the biggest hurdles in quantum computing.
We use spin qubits to develop our system. The advantage of using nitrogen vacancy color centers in diamonds to make qubits allows them to work better at room temperature, and there is also good connectivity with photons. We can also incorporate semiconductor processes to produce qubits.
Scientists around the world are working to obtain the quantum advantage, or reach the point where quantum computers can significantly beat traditional computers at solving complex problems. Most expect this would require at least 50 to 100 stable qubits. Quantum cryptography is another promising field, being the closest commercial application of quantum technology. From using secured Wi-Fi to controlling power grids, Encrypted networks are vital to security on individual, business, and national levels. Using the quantum principles of physics could help make networks unhackable. A secret key is distributed between two parties and cannot be intercepted without collapsing.
Traditional networks are secured with mathematical problems or encryption, which can be resolved and thus hacked. But by using random values and the BB84 protocol, we can check error rates to detect hacking attempts. While quantum network equipment has mostly enabled data centers to connect with a single receiver or client, we have successfully tested a system with multiple receivers.
Han's team aims to develop this multiple receiver system and make the equipment smaller while increasing the distance of data transfers. Korea's Science Ministry aims to invest more than $37 million over the next 5 years to develop a 5-qubit quantum computer and a 100-qubit machine by 2027. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now it's that time in the broadcast where we check out our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information that we do hope will be useful for you as you go about your everyday life. Now, with an increased amount of outdoor activities happening during the summer when the weather is nice, the South Korean government is sounding the alarm about tick-borne illnesses. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says 46 cases of severe fever with thrombocytopenia syndrome, or SFTS, have been reported in South Korea this year. Among them, 11 of the patients died. The most cases were recorded in Gangwon-do province. Symptoms include fever, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. However, because there are no effective treatments for it, people doing outdoor activities are recommended to wear long-sleeve shirts and long pants. It also helps to use insect repellent and to take a shower and change your clothes after spending time outside. Looks pretty nasty there. Now, there has been an explosion in interest in Korean fertilizer in Southeast Asia, with its popularity also gradually increasing further afield to Australia and also to Japan. Our Park Se-young with more.
Thailand is the biggest importer of Korean fertilizers. Based on solid trust, the two countries have been doing business for more than 40 years.
Namhae understand the market in Thailand. This is the most important part, and they produce very good product. Fertilizer from Namhae is outstanding.
Vietnam is the second biggest importer of Korean fertilizers. Last year, Vietnam imported about 100,000 tons of Korean-made fertilizers. The most popular are black DAP fertilizer products, which make up half of the total shipments. Not only are DAP fertilizers suitable for the increasingly popular fruit and vegetable farming in Vietnam, the fertilizer's black color has been customized to meet the preference of Vietnamese farmers. As a result, Korean fertilizers are being sold for around $520 per ton, which is more than $100 more expensive than Chinese-made fertilizers. Korean fertilizers are gaining popularity in the Philippines, Cambodia, and Myanmar, and exports have also reached Australia and Japan. To meet the rising demand from importers, fertilizer maker Namhae is looking to increase its export volume to as much as 90,000 tons.
Our black DAP meets the world's highest quality standards and is #1 in the Vietnamese market. Therefore, our supply is not able to meet the high demand. We're looking to increase the volume produced by adding fertilizer factories.
Because Namhae Chemical is an affiliate of the National Agricultural Cooperative Federation, its earnings from exports of about $200 million a year are used to subsidize fertilizer sold locally, so Korean farmers can buy fertilizer for cheap. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Good morning. The heat continues to linger for western parts of the country, with a heat wave advisory still being in place. Eastern regions, including Daegu, however, will continue to be cooler. Daily highs will be in the mid-20s until the middle of this week, thanks to easterly winds. But have a small umbrella handy. Regions on the east and south coast, as well as Jeju Island, could see 5 to 20 millimeters of rainfall this morning, while passing showers are in the forecast for many inland regions this afternoon, and that's including here in the capital. Hot readings will be much more bearable for regions in the east, while central regions will have a blistering one with high humidity. Monsoon rain returns for the mid part of the week, and that's going to bring the highs down a few notches, while Tuesday is shaping up to be another sweltering one. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news and weather we have for now. Stay tuned to Arirang TV, and we have our next newscast at noon Korea time. Until next time, goodbye.